During a harsh Tennessee winter, a blizzard, unlike any other, descended upon the region, bringing life to a standstill. I was a graduate student at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, accustomed to the mild winters of the South. The forecast had warned of a historic storm, but nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. I lived off campus in a small rented house, a cozy place that had always felt like a safe haven. As the blizzard approached, I stocked up on supplies, planning to wait out the storm. The snow began as a gentle flurry, but quickly escalated into a relentless onslaught, blanketing the city in white. The first night of the blizzard was surreal. The world outside was muffled under the heavy snow, the usual sounds of the city replaced by an eerie silence. I spent the evening by the fireplace, trying to stay warm as the power flickered and eventually went out. Wrapped in blankets, I listened to the howling wind, feeling a sense of isolation that was both peaceful and unnerving. But as the night deepened, the sense of peace was shattered. I heard a noise outside, distinct from the wind, a series of soft thuds, like footsteps crunching in the snow. At first, I dismissed it as my imagination, but the sound persisted, moving around the house. Curiosity mixed with apprehension as I peered out the window, squinting into the blizzard. That's when I saw it, a figure standing in my backyard, barely visible through the swirling snow. The figure was motionless, just a dark silhouette against the white landscape. I couldn't make out any features, but there was something unsettling about its presence. Who would be out during a blizzard like this, and why were they watching my house? I moved away from the window, my mind racing with possibilities. Was it someone seeking shelter, or something more sinister? The isolation of the storm suddenly felt threatening. My house no longer a refuge, but a trap. The figure remained in the yard for what felt like hours, a silent watcher in the storm. I couldn't bring myself to confront it, nor could I shake the feeling of being observed. The night stretched on, an endless cycle of watching and waiting. And as dawn broke, the blizzard began to subside, the world emerging from its frozen cocoon. I mustered the courage to check the backyard, but the figure was gone, leaving no trace in the freshly fallen snow. The aftermath of the storm was chaotic. The city was paralyzed, emergency services overwhelmed, and when I finally reported the incident, the authorities were skeptical, attributing it to the stress of the storm. But I couldn't shake the memory of the silent watcher, the feeling of being observed in my most vulnerable moment. In the weeks that followed, I struggled to feel safe in my own home. The blizzard had passed, but it left behind a sense of unease. The identity of the silent watcher remained a mystery, a haunting presence that had invaded my solitude and left an incredible mark on my psyche. In the winter of 2023, a chilling incident unfolded in the suburbs of Edmonton, Alberta, threatening my safety. I lived alone in a house on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by open fields and distant neighbors. The harsh Canadian winters were something I'd grown accustomed to, but that year, the season brought with it an experience that still haunts me. It began innocently enough. A heavy snowfall had blanketed the area, and so just for fun, I decided to build a snowman in front of my yard. It was a simple creation, adorned with a carrot nose, coal eyes, and an old scarf. I placed it a fair distance from my house, near the edge of the yard where it stood as a single figure in the vast expanse of snow. The first few days after the snowman's creation were uneventful. However, one morning, as I looked out my window, I noticed something odd. The snowman seemed closer to the house than I remembered. I shrugged it off, attributing the discrepancy to my imagination, or perhaps the shifting snow. But as the days passed, the snowman continued to move closer. Each morning it was perceptibly nearer, and its coal eyes seemingly fixated on my house. The realization that it was moving or being moved sent a shiver down my spine. There were no footprints in the snow around it, so no signs of anyone approaching. My nearest neighbors were a mile away, and the idea of someone traversing on the snow-covered fields to move a snowman seemed absurd. The situation escalated one evening when I returned home from work. The snowman was now just a few feet away from my living room window, its face eerily visible in the dim light. I felt a surge of fear and confusion. Who was doing this and why? That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities. The next morning, I decided to dismantle the snowman, hoping to end the unnerving ordeal. But as I approached it, I stopped dead in my tracks. Carved into the snowman's chest was a message. "I'm watching you." Panic set in. This was no prank, it was a threat. I called the police, but they found no evidence to identify the perpetrator. They suggested it might be a local prankster and advised me to stay vigilant. The following days were blur and paranoia and fear. I installed CCTV cameras, but they captured nothing. The snowman was gone, but the sense of being watched remained. I double-checked my locks, avoided windows, and jumped at every second. Then, one night, the terror reached its peak. I was jolted awake by the sound of tapping on my window. Heart pounding, I approached cautiously, dreading what I might find. There, standing in the snow, was a figure. Not the snowman, but a man, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a hood. I was frozen in shock as he stared at me, an unspoken threat hanging in the air. Then, he slowly raised his hand, revealing a knife, glinting in the light. I stumbled backward, fumbling for my phone to call the police. But the man didn't wait. He began to forcefully shake the window, trying to break in. I shouted that I had called the police, but he persisted, his actions fueled by disturbing determination. The sound of sirens eventually pierced the night, and the man fled into the darkness. The police arrived minutes later, but he was gone, leaving behind only the knife and a set of footprints in the snow. The investigation that followed revealed a chilling truth. The man was a former resident of the area, known for his erratic behavior and fascination with stalking. He had fixated on me, watching from the fields, moving the snowman as a twisted game. I couldn't stay in the house after that night. The feeling of being watched and being hunted lingered long after the man was caught. I moved to another town, seeking to leave behind the memories of that winter. This happened 2 years ago. A blizzard of an unprecedented scale hit Black Hollow, a small, isolated town in the Rocky Mountains. I was a freelance writer, drawn to the town for its rich history and scenic beauty, hoping to find inspiration for my next novel. Renting a cabin on the outskirts of town seemed like the perfect retreat. Little did I know it would become the setting of a harrowing ordeal that would change my grasp on reality. The first day in Black Hollow was picturesque, the town blanketed in a peaceful layer of snow. But as night fell, the weather took a turn. The snowfall intensified, the wind howled like a pack of wolves, and the temperature plummeted. I was huddled by the fireplace, the cabin's only source of warmth as the blizzard raged outside. That night, as I lay in bed, a seas of unease crept over me, The wind seemed to carry whispers and voices that were almost human, yet not quite. I attributed it to the isolation and the storm's eerie nature, but sleep eluded me. The next morning, the blizzard showed no signs of stopping. I was effectively trapped, the cabin surrounded by snowdrifts several feet high. Venturing outside was out of the question, so I spent the day writing, trying to distract myself from the storm's relentless fury. As evening approached, the whispers returned, more distinct this time. They seemed to be calling my name, beckoning me. I peered out the window, half expecting to see someone out there, but there was only the blinding white of the blizzard. That night, the situation escalated. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from the basement, a part of the cabin I had avoided, its darkness uninviting. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I approached and opened the basement door, the old wood creaking under my touch. Descending the stairs, the temperature dropped with each step. The basement was shrouded in darkness. The only light was the faint glow of my flashlight. The whispers were louder now, a cacophony of voices that filled the air. My heart raced as I searched the shadows, but there was nothing, no source for the sounds. I was about to ascend the stairs, and that's when I heard it. A faint sobbing, coming from the corner of the basement. Approaching cautiously, I found a small, hidden door, partially concealed behind old furniture. The sobbing was coming from behind it. With trembling hands, I opened the door, revealing a hidden room. Inside, huddled in the corner, was a young woman, her clothes tattered, her eyes wide with fear. She was real, flesh and blood, not a figment of my imagination. She told me her name, which I'm not revealing for obvious reasons, but let's call her Allison for the story. What she told me was as chilling as the blizzard outside. She had been kidnapped months ago, held captive in this hidden room by a man she described as a monster. She had managed to escape her bonds during the blizzard, her captor absent, likely assuming that she couldn't survive the storm. So I led her upstairs, wrapping her in blankets, trying to comfort her as best as I could. The phone lines were down, and the storm made it impossible to leave. We were trapped, but at least we were safe, or so I thought. As night fell, a sense of dread filled the cabin, and her captor was still out there, and with the storm as cover, he could return at any point. So we barricaded the doors, arming ourselves with whatever we could find, and waited. Hours passed in tense silence. The blizzard was our only companion. Then, just before dawn, we heard it. The sound of someone trying to enter the cabin. The door rattled under the force of blows, a man's voice cursing through the wind. Allison and I braced ourselves, ready to fight for our lives. But before the door gave way, the sound of sirens pierced through. The local sheriff, alerted by a concerned neighbor who had noticed the unusual tracks in the snow, had braved the blizzard to check on me. The man was arrested. He was a known criminal with a history of violence. Allison was taken to safety, her nightmare finally over. And as for me, I left Black Hollow as soon as the roads were cleared, the memories of that blizzard still haunting me. The whispers, the hidden room, and Allison's tearful eyes all became a part of the story I never intended to write. The blizzard of Black Hollow taught me the harsh truth that sometimes the most terrifying stories are not those of our own making, but those we stumble upon hidden beneath the surface of seemingly peaceful places.